So we are happy to be joined here by Aaron Lyons from Just Outcomes. And Aaron, you are a presenter here at the 2018 ADRBC Symposium. And you've been talking about restorative justice, things like that, right?
That's right. Yeah,
So
we did a session earlier.
Awesome. It's wonderful to have you join us. Thank you for taking some time.
Thanks for the invitation.
And one of the reasons we grabbed you to chat is that I, at least, am really interested in this space in organizations where something has happened, where we have a harm, or somebody is upset, or somebody has been injured in some kind of a way, and yet it's not illegal in that kind of space. So what do we do in those spaces?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, restorative justice kind of emerged in the criminal justice system. So there was a pretty easy demarcation between where a line had been crossed, So a law's been broken, and so it sets into motion some kind of a justice response. And I think you're talking about all of those many places where that's not so clear, within a school or within a workplace, within all kinds of different agencies where justice may be more of a contested concept, and where justice issues emerge during the course of everyday life, and different people would call it justice or call it conflict. And so how do we sort through those questions? And I think what I have found is that justice and that whole way of thinking about a response to harm can create an opportunity for us to have a discourse about the values and norms of a community, and that community could be an organization. So that, rather than rush to an answer on the question, part of it is about the kind of deliberation that we have in the moment, in the aftermath, about where do we stand. I think one of the things that the conflict resolution field offers to workplaces and organizations is this notion of when something happens and there's a conflict between people, that the people themselves have the wisdom to navigate through that, right? And there's sort of this empowerment model of people can be guided towards solutions. Restorative justice comes from that place too, but as a justice response, there's also this notion of the community has a stake in this somehow. It's not just the people themselves that have the solution, but it's that the community around them have some kind of a moral or ethical stake in the situation. And so there's this balancing act, I think, when it comes to these types of situations that you're referencing, between the value that we place on kind of self-determination of individuals to just kind of sort through issues as they see fit. And on the other hand, the notion of keeping people safe by denouncing harmful acts and by stopping those from happening. So, if you had a bullying situation, just allowing, the person who's abusing their power and the person who's being targeted an opportunity to figure it out by themselves. Well, we already know where that leads, and it's to more of the same, right? So there is, in those types of situations, an obligation for the community to say something into the situation. And of course, how it does that doesn't need to be punitive. It doesn't need to shame people. It needs to be one that tries to build people up rather than tear people down, but at the same time, one that can clearly draw a line in the sand about what is acceptable and what is not. And I think organizations all are tasked with, in some ways, charting the course of that, like drawing that line of at what point is this not a conflict where people have contributed to a problem, but there's been an injustice of some kind, and we need to call it that and respond to that, even as we try to attend to the conflict as well, but not to mix those things up. And I think that's a problem that both restorative justice and the conflict resolution field can sometimes have, is blending together. Just because we feel sometimes hard done by and victimized in a conflict, we then merge these justice and conflict ideas in ways that could be harmful, for example, to the target of bullying, who doesn't need their situation to be labeled as a conflict. And so that notion of some demarcation and the community's response, and that when we do treat an issue as as a violation rather than as just a conflict, that we do that in a way that is in line with values of dignity and respect and inclusion and safety and healing and all of the wisdom that comes down to us from indigenous traditions and from faith traditions and humanistic traditions and from a common sense critique of the criminal justice system and a lot of other sources. But we can certainly learn from those traditions in how to think about justice clearly and try to create some useful distinctions in the process.
I really like that. I think there are echoes of some of what we heard this morning around the idea of, I think they said it as new justice, and the sense of the importance of relationships and how we actually manage those, but also like taking your point around the importance of self-determination within a lot of the conflict processes, but then also needing to actually enlarge our lens and actually like broaden things out so that we are looking at a social level, and sometimes if there is something that we have made a determination that it's wrong. But then also still like knowing where the boundaries are of each sort of process and how we're engaging and what we tend to want to do because we want to help.
Right. And I think sometimes the conflict resolution field, at least as it's been passed down to me, has shied away from any discussion of, for example, rights. Because rights are very difficult to negotiate, and you don't want to get into that stuff because then you're going to end up with a lot of positionality and those kinds of things. So that's an interesting thing to take stock of, right? Okay, so we don't want to talk about rights. and I think in justice there is a willingness to talk about rights, or there should be a willingness to talk about rights, but not to lose sight of that deliberative quality that both the ADR and the restorative justice field can offer.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to sit down and chat with us.
Yeah,
really
my pleasure.
appreciate it, Aaron.
Thanks for the question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.